Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
President Buhari calls on responsible Nigerians to speak out to douse the voices of attention seekers currently dominating public space.
Nigeria's 109 diplomatic missions around the world play more active roles in opening up markets for Nigerian products with the launch of Nigerian Economic Diplomacy Initiative.
Federal government says it will continue to insist on probity, transparency and accountability in public and private sectors of the nation's economy.
Out-of-school children stood at over 10.5 million, the highest for any country in the world.
Now, according to figures from the Ministry of Education, 50% of the cumulative 20 million out-of-school children in the world are in Nigeria. 40% of the children aged 6 to 11 do not attend any primary school, with the northern region the northern region recording the lowest school attendance rate in the country, particularly for girls.
Yes, Rhoda, this was according to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, Adamu Hussaini, at the opening of the 62nd National Council on Education, NCE, in Kano. He said the percentage represents 10.5 million of the 20 million out-of-school children in the world.
Well, the truth is, it's really disturbing, and of course the reports of the 2013 National Demographic Health Survey is also disturbing, because it indicates that 60% of the 10.5 million children that are out of school are girls. It is, however, said that the efforts of the present administration, especially with the school feeding program, the figure of out-of-school children has dropped from 10.5 million to 8.6 million as at last year. While the difference in figure is understandable, many say there is nothing to cheer in the single child, not even to talk of millions of children being out of school.
That's right, Rhoda. Now, what could be responsible for this very disturbing low enrollment and retention of children in schools in Nigeria, you may ask? Well, education experts blamed the situation on, among others, cultural factors like the Almajiri children, the nomadic pastoralists, boy and girl child dropout, social migrants, children living with disability, as well as those of migrant fishermen, and more recently, children displaced by insurgency.
Now, on the demand side, experts noted that poor demand for education leading to exclusion from school may be driven by misperceptions about the benefits of schooling or poor quality of education. Well, the Boko Haram menace comes to mind also here, and many have also blamed poor investment in education by successive administrations, noting that the country's inability to overwhelm the devastating challenges of unemployment and insecurity has negatively impacted on the education sector.
It is generally agreed that no nation can achieve economic prosperity without a sound, inclusive and functional education system. The security and stability of the country, to a large extent, also depends on its ability to provide functional education to its citizens. In a recently launched report on schooling without learning, the World Bank submits that learning shortfalls eventually show up as weak skills in the workplace, making it less likely that young people will find good-paying, satisfying jobs, adding, however, that change is possible.
Well, it is also argued that when education is well delivered, education promises young people employment, better earning, good health, and a life without poverty. Education spurs innovations, strengthens institutions, and fosters social cohesion.
It is, however, worthy of note that the federal and state governments have developed a culture of continuously improving the quality of education from primary to tertiary levels through the provision of state-of-the-art infrastructure facilities, capacity building for teachers, and many other programs to promote effective teaching and learning in schools.
Now, the question, a lot of questions arise here, Joy, and it just, they're numerous. Why has Nigeria not been able to get all her children in school? If the children are not in school, where can they be found? What are the efforts to provide universal basic coverage, and what are the challenges?
That's right, Rhoda. And these and other questions we shall try to provide answers to on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria from the stable of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. I am Joy Usiagbo.
And I am Rhoda Anonam. I join Joy in welcoming you to the program. In the course of the program, we'll bring to you our other segments, and that includes the newspaper review. We have business, we have sports, foreign, and entertainment news. But as always, the news comes first, and Laurie Bala Hassan is here this morning to give us the news in brief. Laurie, good to see you, looking good. Good morning.
Good to see you too, Rhoda and Joy. Good morning and welcome to the news. The federal government says it will continue to insist on probity, transparency and accountability in public and private sectors of the nation's economy as a deliberate attempt at securing the future of the country for all Nigerians, especially the youth. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this while receiving letters of credence from the new head of European Union delegation to Nigeria and two other envoys. And still from the presidential villa, President Muhammadu Buhari says the time has come for well-meaning and responsible Nigerians to speak out rather than allow those he calls rabble-rousers and attention-seekers to continue dominating the public space. Receiving the national leadership of the Arewa pastors under the auspices of Non-Denominational Initiative for Peace in Nigeria, the president describes as baseless, unfounded and mischievous the unguarded statements by some voices accusing him and the governing APC of religious bias.
Unaccountably assuming the role of anarchists and stoking the fires of violence and instability in our country, your voice of sanity is like a breath of fresh air. Your initiative and your stand mark you out as responsible Nigerians. Responsible people must speak out and not leave the public space to rabble-rousers and attention seekers.
Meanwhile, Nigerian 109 diplomatic missions around the world will now play a more active role in opening up markets for Nigerian products as the nation moves to consolidate on the economic growth and recovery plan. At the launch of the Nigerian Economic Diplomacy Initiative in Abuja, Vice President Yemi Oshinbajo reaffirmed that Nigeria cannot afford to continue playing the role of market for other nations without commensurate benefits.
Very important for us as a nation to effectively utilize, of course, our human and material resources. And I think this initiative will contribute to this objective by enhancing the capacity of our diplomats to conduct economic diplomacy at a very practical level at home and abroad.
In the meantime, the federal government says it will continue to provide enabling environment for investors through the ease of doing business policy for the economic rejuvenation of the country. Ilyasu Ali Yakubu reports that the secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, stated this while playing host to a high-powered delegation of investors from Ukraine at a roundtable discussion.
Has been in partnership with Nigeria over the years in various sectors of our economy, particularly in the area of military hardware for fighting terrorism.
Nigeria is a strategic partner for us. Nigeria has been identified as the market in focus for Ukrainian exports.
The countries are having confidence in the government of the day and therefore coming forward to say, come, we're ready to do business with you.
Our free zones in need more than ever before to have foreign partnerships, that will enable us, to deliver on the mandate of the free zones.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has reaffirmed that President Muhammadu Buhari is on a rescue mission to Nigeria. Anthony Forson reports that the minister stated this when he received in audience the head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Winifred Oyo-Ita, in his office.
In less than 3 years, we are proud of our record. It does not matter what the naysayers are saying. One thing they've not been able to do is to challenge the figures that we put out. This government has done a lot to reverse the trend of terrorism, especially Boko Haram.
The challenges we found out is that you are seriously underfunded. The Federal Ministry of Information and Culture should be regarded as a grade A ministry because we observed that the Information and Culture Ministry is not getting what it should get in terms of funding.
The rate at which development strides of the present administration is being reported is far low compared to the achievements on ground. Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Winifred Oyo-Ita, made the observation at a peer preview of the Ministry of Information and Culture.
The ministry has been working assiduously to create an enabling environment for the various sectors to thrive through policies and actions driven through the combined efforts of its dedicated staff and the parastatals that are the implementing arm of the ministry.
If it is funding, you must get it across to your minister that this ministry needs funds to project the activities of this administration.
President Muhammadu Buhari has congratulated Julius Maada Bio on his victory as the new president of Sierra Leone after the presidential election runoff on March 31st. The president commends the people of Sierra Leone on the successful conduct of the presidential election runoff as well as the parliamentary and local council elections held on March 7, 2018. With the elections concluded and following the trend of recently held peaceful elections in West Africa, President Buhari urges all stakeholders in Sierra Leone to work together for the peace, security and development of the country. He enjoins all those with grievances over the outcome of the elections to seek constitutional means of resolving them, stressing that nothing should be done to endanger the peace and stability of the country in particular and the sub-region in general. The Nigerian leader salutes the resilient spirit of Sierra Leoneans who have clearly demonstrated their ability to manage their own affairs and consolidate on the country's progress after a post-conflict era. The role played by NTA in anti-piracy war and showcasing the activities of the National Film and Video Censors Board has been applauded. The executive director of the board, Adedayo Thomas, gave the commendation during a visit to the Director General, NTA, in Abuja.
We have other areas that has not been well known by the populace. Therefore, we have classifications like 12, PG 12A 15, 18, General View, and RE. Any film without this rating does not pass through the board, hence it is illegal. We need to regulate what goes for the public consumption. We have been arresting and prosecuting those that produce and distribute films and video works not licensed for distribution in Nigeria, and persons not licensed to carry out distribution of films and video works.
We share your hopes and aspirations, we share in your dreams, and we'll be there with you all the way. We are not doing anything extraordinary by working with you. It is how it should be.
And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll be back with Rhoda and Joy after this break. Good morning.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped. We are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime. We bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
All right, you're welcome back, and if you've just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. Now we'll update you in the world of business as Naira remains stable on the official market, just as the new national tax policy continues to attract more encomiums. Joy Uzo brings us more details of this on our business news segment.
Welcome to Business News. We'll start with a report on the federal government sanctioning importers who engage in illegal importation. Now, the federal government says it will descend on any importer who engages in bringing genetically modified crops and plants into the country without permission. Superstore owners are also warned against selling genetically modified maize without approval.
The agency will not hesitate to close down any company, any importers, or arrest any importer that goes into the importation of genetically modified seeds or grains without biosafety permit.
Experts say it is a good step in the right direction that will further check the quality and brands of goods imported into the country, even as the federal government intensifies efforts to strengthen the nation's export capacity. In another development, as a voluntary assets and income declaration scheme expires after a 9-month window of opportunity for taxpayers to regularize their tax liabilities, some tax practitioners have advised the government on how best to actualize this task. They also commended the new national tax policy of the federal government.
We had one previously, but it was just a mere blueprint which didn't take us anywhere. You know, but this new tax policy was done pretty well.
A lot of money is coming in through taxation, so it is gradually increasing. But the challenge we are going to have is the sustainability.
And to the money market, the Naira is likely to remain stable 2 days after the CBN maintained its tight policy on interest rates to support the local currency. On the official market, the Naira was quoted at 305 Naira to the dollar on Thursday. And trading on the equities market finished on a bullish note on Thursday as the Nigerian Stock Exchange All-Share Index appreciated by 0.31%. Market capitalization closed at 14 trillion Naira, while the volume of stocks traded was 495 million in 4,614 deals. Prestige led the gainers table with a gain of 9.30%, while Lasaco and Transcorp followed closely. On the other hand, GlaxoSmith, Jaiz Bank and Japo Oil led the losers table. UBA, Fidelity Bank and Guarantee Trust Bank topped as the most traded stocks with a volume of 103 million, 90 million and 62 million respectively. And on that note, we wrap up business news. Many thanks for watching. My name is Joy Uzo.
All right, thank you very much, Joy Uzo, there for that business news update. Time now for us to take a look at the stories trending on the front pages of some of the dailies we have here with us. Newspaper review is up next.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebi, is in the studio. Good morning, Bayo.
Morning,
welcome.
Joy. Good morning, Rhoda, and good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, it's good to have you join us again this
Thank
morning. Thank God it's Friday.
Yes, it's Friday.
All right, so let's begin with the papers that we have here with us this morning. The picture story on most of the dailies are the same, and it was the meeting of President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday with a group of religious leaders from the North, Christian religious leaders. But then let's begin with the lead story. It's on the New Telegraph. It says 58 killed in Zamfara, Kwara, Yobe and Kaduna. Robbers attack banks, kill 17, cut away millions of naira. That's a rider there and said vet toll rises in Yobe cholera outbreak. Gunmen kill village head and 5 others. That's on page 8 and 9 of the New Telegraph. Those are the riders there with the lead story, 58 killed in Zamfara, Kwara, Yobe and Kaduna. Let's quickly move over now to the leadership. On the leadership, it says, my appointments are based on merit. That's the lead story for the leadership. It says, my appointments are based on merit, says President Muhammadu Buhari. All right, we don't have that on the screen right now. And it explains reluctance to sign economic partnership agreement. Those are the lead stories that we have right now. But we'll see if we can get you the front page of the leadership. All right, Joy.
Let's go quickly to the Daily Independent. Yeah. And there's a story about killings below the picture story there, which says, bandits kill village head, 9 others in Kaduna communities. And the writer there says, 10 feared dead in fresh headsman attack in Benue. And there's a bold story below the nameplate there. It says, Oyegun begins re-election moves, calls Tinubu's bluff. It has 2 riders. Tinubu may back Oshomole. Oyegun is incompetent, says Ibokwe. And beside the picture story there, there's one which says, I have no bias against Christians, says Buhari. The writer there says, northern pastors accuse churches of fueling hate speech.
All right, Bayo, let's begin with, first of all, the killings and then, of course, the meeting of the president with the Arewa pastors of non-denominational initiative for peace that he met yesterday at the State House.
Yes, I think the New Telegraph is doing a summation of the series of killing that has been reported around the country. And the locations are, I think, 4 of them. 21 bandits were killed in Zamfara. These were the soldiers that went in there because the bandits had gone completely out of control there in Zamfara. The other ones are incidences in Jema local government where among the persons killed were also a village head. The other place is in Benue where 10 persons have also been reported killed by armed men. But the last one is the killing of 17 persons as reported by some people, and this resulted from attack by a gang of 15 armed robbers who invaded ancient town of Ofa yesterday. The people of Ofa are now counting their losses. They actually blocked the main artery that crosses the town at the Ilori end and the Oshobo end, and went straight to the police station, killed policemen and complainers at the police station. They now returned to 5 banks, 3 older generation banks and 2 other new generation banks, where they spent about an hour operating. At the end of the day, they escaped through another village route, Igosun Road, and left. By evening of that day, there was alarm in the ancient city of Ofa, and there were calls for people to come and donate blood for so many persons that were injured. In fact, among the deaths are reported were persons, traders at a market very close to the banking area, and even a commercial motorcyclist who was riding, they seized his motorcycle and he was killed. They were shooting people in the head. So, and it's been like that. The style they use, if you recall, about a month ago, there was a similar attack in Lapai in Niger State. They came in, blocked the 2 entries into the city, attacked the police station, and then go straight to the bank. It's the same strategy they are using.
And they seem to be operating more in the rural communities these days.
Yes, yes, and within the North Central is becoming very predominant because where they are attacking Ofa is also part of the North Central part of Nigeria. And it's been on for a long time. In fact, banking transactions in Ofa don't normally start at the normal hours. They start at about 9 o'clock and close every day about 2 o'clock. This is because of fear of this persistent attack. Now that this has happened, it's certain the banks are going to close and all the villages surrounding that area are going to suffer because they will not have access to banks.
This should be a call to action to the police.
Yes.
And let's hope they will take charge and solve this problem as soon as possible.
Yes, already the spokesman for the police, Ajayi Okasami, has already confirmed, and he said the police are investigating and they are probably will be on the trail of the robbers. And talking about the economic partnership, Nigeria did not sign the economic partnership agreement because it will not protect her economy. This declaration was made by President yesterday, and he said that if he had signed that, it would have exposed Nigerian industries to competition with already established industries in Europe. He says, we have a very youthful population, and we are striving to provide jobs from the youth. And if we had approved that and signed that agreement, we would have been endangering our industries and putting the opportunities of jobs to be created for our youth at jeopardy.
And a lot of economic experts did suspect that that was the reason why he didn't sign in the first place before now.
We know there are implications with international agreements. Sometimes because of the fanfare and the regional implication, you go there and you sign, but every nation acts to protect its own interests.
And you remember, Bayo, we had a couple of guests here on the program, you know, that week. I think after the president had the client going for, the announcement was out at the weekend. The next week, I think on a Monday or Tuesday, we had guests here on the program who spoke extensively to it, and some of the concerns that they raised is what the president has actually said for an economy that is trying to grow itself and be self-reliant, having other countries, you know, come in, or agreements like that have other countries come in here to dump goods. And Nigeria is an economy that people were always receiving and, you know, not exporting a lot of the things that we produce here. So it's in a way, it seemed as though it was going to be like, you know, a minus for us and, and a plus for other African countries.
All right, let's go quickly to the Nigerian pilot. Below the nameplate there's a story which says, gunmen attack Rivers police station, cut away rifles. And beside it, it says, amnesty to focus on reintegration of beneficiaries. And this is attributed to Professor Dokubo. Below the picture story there, we have one which says, PDP urges NAS to sanction Buhari on $1 billion arms purchase. Backs election sequence.
All right, we'll now take the New Telegraph. On the New Telegraph, it says just below the picture story, we have some name piece, some earpiece there, about 4 of them. It says APC Lotus list irresponsible, says Wike. It's on page 29. Tenor extension, National Working Committee members move belongings out of APC Secretariat. It's on page 3. Malayas approaches Supreme Court over a court process. Tino Malaya approaches Supreme Court over a court process. And there's also a story that's trending on other papers too. It's on pregnant women protest in Ondo. It's kind of detailed, saying that they have to pay up to about 25,000 naira in public hospitals. It's trending also on the leadership for the delivery in the state, and so there's a protest there. All right, there's a story here. It says Kachuku, Nigeria loses. It's above the nameplate on the New Telegraph. It says Kachuku, that's the Minister of State Petroleum. Nigeria losing 1.4 trillion naira per annum on fuel import. It's on page 3, and above that it says FY 2017, 5 big bank customers deposit hits 11.427 trillion naira. Mile.
And still looking at the Nigerian pilot, there's also another story from the NNPC which is attributed to Kachuku. It says Nigeria to upgrade oil and gas infrastructure is below the picture story there. We also have another story beside it, which says NHIS to accredit 11 out of 57 HMOs.
All right, bye.
Yes, talking about the Nigeria NNPC and incurring about 1.4 trillion yearly now as what is called under recovery. Before, they used to call it subsidy, but there's no subsidy because the National Assembly did not approve. And the Minister of State was actually advising that we should now concentrate our attention towards developing our gas facilities so that we divert our attention from the usage of PMS petrol so that we eliminate the challenges we are having with petrol queues and prices, because already he's raising an alarm that NNPC, who is now the sole importer of petroleum, is incurring about 1.4 trillion naira as undercover charges, because NNPC imports alone, already the landing cost at the port is 170 naira. But because there is a rule that you cannot sell below 145 naira, above 145 naira, NNPC is forced to bear that loss. However, it is no subsidy because it is part of the undercover loss that NNPC is meant to bear. But the other issue of concern with the running story relates to Cambridge Analytica. It has been indicated that a copy of the video that relates to Nigeria's election, which was deliberately done to interfere or influence Nigeria's election, has been given to the British Parliament. The video was said to be so graphic that it was described by the Facebook itself as totally unacceptable. Because of its graphic nature, they said it was called murder video, and it was proscribed from being aired. It was very graphic, and it was also highlighting religious biases, which was not very good for the nation then. And following a development in Lagos, a supervisor of the recent UTME examination has been arrested. She was seen on camera helping a candidate write their exams. She was therefore arrested, and she says she's sorry she had to help the candidate because the candidate was ill.
All right, let's quickly take our editorial. Our editorial this morning is on The Guardian, and it's titled Onogen's Fight Against Corruption in the Judiciary. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, CJN, that's Walter Onogen, could not be more correct to say recently that corruption in the judiciary is not limited to bribe taking, but includes the giving of judgments or orders based on any consideration other than legal merit.
Yes, you recall that when the CJN was sworn in, he affirmed emphatically that his tenure will see the fight against corruption and also misconduct in the judiciary.
Yeah.
He has condemned corruption, instances of corruption in the judiciary seriously, but he has also identified that majority of judges are working diligently and are honest judges, but there are a few bad eggs who use other considerations, like you said now, that are legal to give judgments. However, in that regard, he has also taken measures. You will recall that he set up, he advised all the judicial sections across the country to appoint a special court for corruption cases, and corruption and financial crime cases. Secondly, he also established what is called an acronym. It has an acronym, COTRIMCO, Corruption and Financial Crimes Cases Trial Monitoring Committee. The idea is to make sure that such cases are tried speedily and are also considerations are purely legal in giving judgments. But however, he has also emphasized that in the court, you cannot have a draw case. One party has to win. And he has harped on one issue that it is obvious to everybody. Even the Transparency International recent recording of evaluation of corruption cases said that Nigeria is very high in arresting corruption cases, but poorly in securing convictions. And the rules are not far-fetched. If you don't prosecute cases diligently and effectively, you can't expect to get conviction from the courts.
All right. Thank you very much, Bayo, for your thoughts this morning on the stories on the dailies. Thank you so much. We'll see you again on Monday morning.
See you on Monday.
All right. If you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, our conversation segment will be up shortly, and we're looking at the phenomenon of out-of-school children in Nigeria. We'll take a short break now, and we'll be back.
Don't we just love our jolly, easygoing keke riders? But alas, many of them are also worse than a bone in the throat.
I go beat you, give you a gogoro drink.
Troublesome and completely disobedient of traffic laws and other road users. What is responsible for this?
Did you drink this morning before coming out?
6 small shots.
Yes.
The rib-cracking comedy takes a look at a day in a typical keke rider's life in this episode titled Anthony Keke.
Keke riders, for crying out loud, always check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Keep a date with us as this episode premieres season 6 and laugh like never before.
Hey, you want fight for woman will not even like you. It reminds me, I wish I give her 500 naira now. The woman will just agree me.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow,
the largest data network. Glow Unlimited.
Can I see your particulars, sir?
Officer, my particulars no dey here.
In that case, you'll have to come with me to the police station.
Officer, which levels? Where I for find you something make you take arrange your weekend.
What? Offense number 1, driving without particulars. Offense number 2, trying to bribe an officer of the law.
I won't harass Nigerians or take bribe. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We have a guest already seated here in the studio, and this morning we're looking at a very, very critical issue. It's on the education sector, and of course, it's the phenomenon of out-of-school children that we have in Nigeria. And to set the tone for our discussion, Mitari Igbe has put together this background report, at least to give us an insight into our discussion.
UNICEF statistics indicate that there are 10.5 million children who are out of school in Nigeria, and this is believed to be the highest globally. Not even a reported increase in primary school enrollment in Nigeria has changed the narrative, as emergent factors such as the Boko Haram insurgency deprive a significant percentage of the nation's future leaders of their right to education. For instance, 60% of the 10.5 million out-of-school children in the country are said to reside in the north, and the reasons are not far-fetched, as an estimated 1,400 schools have been destroyed in Borno State alone as a result of years of Boko Haram insurgency in the state. With that in mind, the ravaging effect of insurgency on education is only imagined, as many children who should be in school are languishing in internally displaced persons camps in parts of the country. Besides insurgency, other factors that have contributed to the out-of-school children statistics range from irresponsible parenting to cultural and sex barriers, inadequate funding of the education sector, child labor, child marriage, and poverty, to mention a few. If the trend is not curtailed, needless to say that it can result to a weak workforce, slow industrialization, and economic growth, as well as a proliferation of social vices, to say the least. The Nigerian government has, however, initiated a number of social interventions to arrest the trend, such as the homegrown school feeding program, provision of educational infrastructure, and a national enrollment drive policy to take Nigerian children off the streets and put them in schools. What has been the impact of these initiatives so far, and what more radical measures or policies are required to reduce the out-of-school children in Nigeria? These are some posers for guests on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Mitari, for that background. We're now being joined in the studio by Bello Kagara, Director, Social Mobilization of the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC. Welcome you to Good Morning, Nigeria.
Good morning to you all. Good morning, and assalamu alaikum to Nigerians.
Also with us in the studio is Terry Dornan, UNICEF Chief of Education Officer in Abuja. Mr. Terry, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with all of Nigeria.
You're welcome. Also joining in the discussion is Mohammed Sabo Kena, Team Leader, Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. Mr. Kena, thanks for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Jai Gaskia will also be joining in the discussion in the course of the program. And in our Kaduna Network Center is Dr. Bala Muhammad, a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communication, Bayero University, Kano. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin our discussion with the UNICEF Chief of Education Officer who's here with us. Though that's a Terry Dornan. Now, though a lot of people have issues with the figures that you have rolled out, that's you're saying that 20.5 million children are out of school, and out of that number, 10.5 million are from Nigeria. A lot of people question that because we're looking at children in Syria who are not going to school, children in Iraq, we're looking at children in other African countries. So how come Nigeria has this number? But first of all, let's look at how bad it is, the burden that this number of children are out of school.
Thank you again. When you talk about the number of children out of school in Nigeria, it's roughly 10 million. And that's in terms of the world. If Nigeria does not address this problem, the world will not address the problem of out-of-school children. Because the burden in Nigeria is a huge percentage of the global burden of out-of-school children.
But how accurate is that number?
We did an analysis. This is a number actually, if you look at the Federal Ministry of Education's Ministerial Strategic Plan, it's a number quoted in the ministerial document. And this number has come out of an analysis that was done in 2012, I believe.
Okay.
With UNESCO, UNICEF, in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Education. I think part of the challenge is when we talk about attendance or out-of-school children, we're talking about children out of formal education.
Okay.
Formally, and that's looking at children from primary and lower secondary, the 9 years, which is the mandatory part in Nigeria in terms of universal basic education. So there are additional children who are attending, as I think one of your guests will talk about, Almajiri education, or as in partnership that UNICEF has with UBEC and the NMAC, looking at supporting integrated Quranic education, which looks at the vast number of Quranic schools specifically in northern Nigeria, and looking at how you integrate government basic education subjects along with the traditional subjects within these schools. So more children are getting the foundational knowledge that they need to go on in society and contribute to society.
Mr. Bello, do you agree with this figure? Because it sounds alarming.
Yeah, anyway, good morning. Let me, excuse me, sorry. Let me start by correcting an impression about the figure. The figure is not 26 or 21 million worldwide. The figure we have today is 263 million as per UNESCO Institute of Statistics worldwide. Yeah. And then out of that figure, the target group of children in primary and junior secondary schools is 61 million. Is out of that 61 million, is out of that 61 million children of primary and junior school going children that Nigeria has that figure of 10.5, which during the last demographic health survey conducted by UNICEF, a new figure has been established that is now 11.4. However, as a result of another study conducted by the Ministry of Education jointly with UNICEF in 2013, because of the Northeast and the various conflicts surrounding or happening in Nigeria, the figure now is said to be, that's not empirical statistics, but it's said to be 13.2 billion.
Are we talking about presently now, right now?
Presently now, yes.
But then let's not forget that this administration is doing a lot in that area.
Absolutely.
In the sense that the school feeding program from, I don't know if a new statistics has been conducted now as we speak, because we are aware that the school feeding program has actually brought a lot of children back.
Absolutely.
And look at some states in the country who have given free education for children the primary school, at the primary school level, they've given free education. Is that number not included? Because I'm aware that we have just 8.5 million out-of-school children. How true is that now?
Yeah, you see,
or is that possible?
The statistics we have in Nigeria, like I said, is the statistic obtained by a joint study conducted by the Federal Ministry of Education and UNICEF. That was in 2013. The figure I'm quoting, the figure of 13.2, which encompasses all those statistics and then including the new trends of out-of-school children that come about as a result of the insurgency in the Northeast, and then the various conflicts happening around the country.
All right, now, thank you very much. Now, let's go to our Kaduna Network Center, where we have Dr. Bala Mohammed, who's a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communication in Bayero University. Now, Dr. Bala Mohammed, you've listened to the numbers, though the numbers vary as per the year that it was conducted, 2012, 2013, and even right now from 2015 when this administration came in, where we're beginning to see a decrease in the number. But then what are the challenges that this kind of figures pose to us as a nation?
Thank you very much once again. I think you in Abuja are now worried much about statistics. We in the far north, I live in Kano, I see the statistics every day. I drive to my workplace and I see the children. In Abuja, you don't see them at all. So you always rely on statistics to imagine that they exist. They do exist, and we have to qualify which children are out of school. Actually, they are the children of the rural and urban poor, not my children, not the children of the governor, not the children of the local government chairman. all these children we're talking about is a structural problem because it is part of the poverty of the nation and the government and the system and the whole institutions in education. The children of the poor are shortchanged. Even those in school today are not getting functional education. We just want to push all children into school, even if it is not functional education. Having said that, yes, this is a great challenge. It is a serious threat to our future. When they say 60% in the north, I believe it should be like 90% because we live with this statistic. We see what is happening, which shows you that state governments, as the Constitution does say, is not capable of handling primary or basic education. We believe that in the academics. We believe that should be the reason why this is happening. The UBEC, that is the Universal Basic Education Commission, of which Kagara, my good friend, is representing on this panel, knows that they should do something. Primary and junior secondary schools cannot and should not be handled by state governments. There should be a paradigm shift now, and so that we can save these children. It seems, look, the governments, as we have them now, look at the millions and billions of naira lying dormant at UBEC because states refuse or are unable to bring counterpart funding for more classes, for more equipment, for more teachers. It shows there is a disconnect somewhere. We should look, because these figures are continuously increasing, and they were 10 million, now they are telling me 13 million. I think they are more than that because we have so many children who are out of these statistics because there is no way you can count them in the rural areas, especially here in the north. So we think that there should be some sort of institutional overhaul where we look at basic education from primary school to junior secondary school and do something radical about it, because even those who are in school are not getting a functional education, and they come out of primary schools, they come out of junior secondary schools. In fact, when they come out of senior secondary schools, we end up in the university only admitting children of the elite. My children, your children, the UNICEF children, the UBEC children, the Kagara children are the ones who are admitted in the university. Those children who were in school are not getting admitted because of the lack of functional education. So out-of-school children is a serious challenge, and it's a security issue also, because the idle mind is a devil's workshop.
Dr. Bala will return to you in the course of the program. Now let's come back to Abuja and go to Mr. Kiena of the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. Now, how bad is the situation looking at the figures we have right now?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Let me start by saying that I'm not an authority on the issue of Almajiri children, and I'm not an expert in the education sector. I'm just a concerned citizen who is trying to bring this to the consciousness of the leaders and the nation. And I'm very glad that we're having this discussion today. And what we are committed to do on our own part is to make sure that we continue to have this discussion until something is done about it. The situation with the Almajiri children is indeed very, very bad and very terrible. These children, we all know that they are entitled to basic right to have education like every other child. And over the years, we have seen that their right to education have been deprived. And this is what we are trying to bring to the consciousness of the nation. The UBEC chairman and executive is here. I'm glad that it's here. The policies that have been implemented or brought about, that was established by UBEC over the time, has not really been designed in such a way to address the Almajiri issue. It's not enough for us to think that if we build a classrooms or make the school attractive, like the school feeding program will attract Almajiri children into the school. That is not enough. The UNICEF man is here. I read a report on their website that says they went to a local government in Zamfara State to convince an Almajiri child, Almajiri Malan, to introduce basic education for the children. And the man resisted. This goes to show that beyond providing the classroom, beyond including a school feeding program, there's other factors that prevent these children from even getting having the education, and that's the issue of enlightenment, which we have not really focused on. There's up to now a very high percentage of people in the northern part of the country do not see the importance of this education for their children. And that is a fact. I have engaged some Malams who told me that it's not that they do not want the children to have this formal education so that it does not overshadow the Islamic education. So there needs to be a program or a policy that will that will enlighten people, that enlighten the northerners that these children can have the Islamic education as well as the formal education. Unless we have that, unless we have that conviction, then if we have classrooms and other incentive, we can get these children to the school. But for us to say that we only build classes or other incentive, it's not enough to really drag them to the school. There's a lot of need to be done in terms of enlightenment.
Thank you, Mr. Kiana. Mr. Bello Kagara, you listened to him and you heard some of the challenges they face over there. Is UBEC considering some of these challenges? Are you aware of them and are you addressing them?
Absolutely. I want to first thank the last speaker for the points he raised, that the issue of Almajiri is beyond building classrooms. It's beyond making the classrooms look attractive. But let me just say that UBEC as an institution has been approaching the Almajiri issue from several angles. One, at the level of advocacy, like he said, at the level of construction to provide related infrastructure that will now make and then accommodate children. And then one strategy we're now employing at UBEC is to now see how do we now provide linkages, direct linkages with the teachers. Because unless and until the teachers, the Malams, accept the program, certainly not much could be achieved.
All right, thank you very, very much. But I would like to now direct my question to Terry Donien. You have listened to the other guests, what the concerns that they have raised. But gentlemen, let's not forget that we are not just, it's not just the Almajiri children now. We're looking at the migrant pastoralist children. We're looking at children with disabilities. We're also looking at migrant fishermen children in the South who are also not in school. But then, Mr. Terry Donien, from your research or from your work, why has it been difficult to reach these children?
I think a lot of issues were raised by the gentleman talking about Almajiri education as he began. And I agree with Bello that it's not simply building, it's really going down to the community, the parent level, and engaging. And I wouldn't necessarily phrase enlightenment, but raising the value. And it shouldn't be for parents a choice. I agree that education should be right, and parents should have a voice in the type of education. So it shouldn't be this education or that education. That both traditional and formal education, children need both in terms of being successful citizens and engaged in the community. If we look at the situation, for example, in Borno, a lot of the foundational causes is a lot of youth, adolescents who were never in school, never had the opportunity, disenfranchised, separated from opportunities, hope. And that contributed to the conflict. So if we look at education as providing children the tools and the ability to engage in their local community, but the wider Nigerian society, it's very essential. So in partnerships with UBEC, UNICEF has supported the Enrollment Drive campaign framework. And that's shown that, and it's going right down to the community level where school management committees do enrollment drives, and they go out, they meet parents, they talk to people, discuss, and bring the children into school. Because participation in school should be everyone's responsibility. Yesterday there was a launch of the Global Education Monitoring Report here in Abuja. We talk about accountability and the importance that The accountability for everybody, I mean, government has a lot of accountability, but also students, parents, in terms of accountability of engaging in the system. And that's very important. And we've seen changes with the enrollment drive campaign. I think, for example, in Abuja, we see an increase in enrollment, looking at the latest mixed data. And that's girls and boys. So it's showing promise. And that's data from 2016. So there is, in states that, for example, this intervention has been rolled out, there has been an increase in children in school, boys and girls. There's a cash transfer program that we're working in partnership with state governments in Sokoto and Niger. Provides, excuse me, cash to families to address issues of families not having funds to support the education of girls. And that, we're talking about this morning, there's an impact evaluation that was conducted, and it'll be presented on the 16th of this month. And it showed the impact of improvement in the family, the role of women, but also girls being in school, and parents and families supporting that. Because the negative issues around girls working, girls need to be staying at home, household, there's more value seen, and the parents are able to send the children to school.
Thank you very much, Mr. Terry. Mr. Bello Kagara, talking about girls, well, the essence of this topic is to focus on these issues and to find solutions to them. So he talked about girls, and I want us to go to that now. The statistics shows that about 60% of these girls are out of school, and you know how valuable girls are to the family. What are you doing to change that narrative?
That's excellent. Before I respond to that question, still I would like to put the issue of out-of-school children within context. I don't so much agree with the fact that these children are difficult to reach. No. It is the factors and the barriers that made them not come into school that are difficult to overcome. The cultural barriers, the economic barriers, the social barriers, and all these kind of inhibiting factors that kept children out of school. Children do not refuse to go to school. Children are kept out of school. That's the impression I would like to address, and then bring the attention of all of you and even the nation. Before I go on to the issue of the girl child.
It's interesting to note that you are aware of this barrier. So what are you doing? Yeah,
you see, some of these cultural barriers are beyond what UBEC can do as an institution. It requires the effort of all stakeholders. The government at the top, we've got funding and advocacy, UBEC too, funding and advocacy, which we receive from government. But apart from that, the parents too have some attitudinal issues on the value, like Terry has said, value for education. Unless and until we change the tide in the minds of the parents to see value and place value and prioritize education, no matter what effort is put, hardly can we.
But then that has to do with enlightenment.
Exactly.
Enlightenment, just as Kiana has raised earlier, the need to enlighten the parents. Are there specific programs targeted at that?
Yeah, sure. Within UBEC in particular, let me speak for UBEC. Within UBEC, I'm the director of social mobilization. We have a vigorous, virile program targeting the rural poor communities and then the urban poor settlements, because that's the areas where the larger part and segments of the out-of-school children are. But then with regard to enlightenment, just yesterday in my office, we were discussing on how to engage. I mean, we are developing a very strong communication strategy with regard to communicating UBE and thrust of UBE to the various stakeholders so that we have the right understanding and then the right participatory role by all categories of stakeholders. Let me give you an example. Whatever we do, if the parents do not play their roles, if the individuals in the community who are wealthy to do not play their roles in advocating and supporting the process, if the governments at state level do not have the right political will to now support the basic education delivery, I don't think UBEC as an institution can do much.
All right.
But then back to the question of girl child education. Presently, the current leadership in UBEC has focused attention on the education of the girl child. Already, UBEC has been, like you all know, Terry knows, has been constructing special girl child schools across all the states of the Federation. But apart from that, our attention has now focused on building second chance education centers for girl education exclusively. Why we're going to provide the second chance women with educational facilities, structures, equipment, especially with regard to learning some trades and skills that will empower them. We're doing much in that regard.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bello Kagara. Now, Mr. Kiana, the question on my mind is, how did we get here? Because I know that at some point, communities, because he's saying now that apart from the parents, communities, the community too has a role to play. In those days, community sponsored people to go to school. People would come together in a community. You'd see people would contribute money to take care of a school premises for students or provide learning materials for schools. So what happened? How did we miss it that now we have to go back and start enlightening parents and communities on the essence of education, the importance?
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to first of all appreciate the director from the UBEC. I mean, he said a lot of things concerning what we are really emphasizing on the issue of enlightenment and all that. Now, how do we get here? Simple, I mean, it's the failure of leadership, failure of governance, past and present, dead and alive. Those northern leaders who have had the opportunity to really do something more drastic about this fail in their responsibility in doing that. That's why that's why we are here. And up to now, they don't care. You go to the north, to the northern part of the country, you see them. I mean, I was in Zamfara State, and I saw street lights in the night, and I asked, "Oh, great, NEPA is doing great here," and they told me, "No, it's a generator that is being powered. That is powering the street light. How is that a priority?" So the leaders need to really wake up to their responsibility and invest in the education of the children. And what I really see that we as citizens, we as a community people, we really need to do more in terms of holding our leaders accountable. Okay, failure to hold them accountable, is giving them room to be corrupt in a way. Because if there are funds that are supposed to go into the investment of education or to support these children, and they are not being used in that direction, and I've been diverted into frivolous projects like lighting up the street at night where there are no economic activities. There's no how we can get to solve this problem. So part of what we are proposing in our own solution, of course, is a community-driven initiative to really address the issue of Almajiri, and it's possible. We are thinking of a model where we can, kind of match the out-of-school child in the community to a child who is in school by a rich parent. So it's possible there's a way government and the community can be able to liaise to design a social program that can support the out-of-school initiative. So I think the solution to the out-of-school children can be solved through the community in partnership with the government. Everybody needs to get involved beyond just the rhetoric of school construction and all that.
All right, Mohammed Sabo Kiena, team leader, Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Want to move over to our Kaduna Network Center now, where Dr. Bala is waiting. Dr. Bala, data indicates that among other factors, some of the reasons adduced for these out-of-school children and the issue of retention, it's because of poor teacher quality. And you remember very well that a while ago we had that same scenario in Kaduna playing out with teachers and the quality of teachers and the need to get teachers who can teach children very well in. Now, what are we doing to ensure that we get good teachers in our schools, not just Kaduna, but across Nigeria?
Thank you very much again. I think the problems are very many, but going back to the Almajiri child first, I think the Almajiri child is in school, but is not getting an education. We should get this clear. The Almajiri child is supposedly in school, so he's not out of school. The Quranic school he's attending is called a school, and but it is not getting him a functional education to be able to function in 21st century world. And I have an information. The Sultan of Sokoto has a committee of which I'm privileged to be a member on Almajiri education and how it can be integrated into the mainstream. And he called a meeting in Kaduna where the Director General of UBEC was there, Dr. Hamid Boboy. He also spoke on Almajiri education. There is now a standing committee by the Sultan of Sokoto trying to give a report to the Sultan, which will in turn maybe address the Federal Ministry of Education and perhaps the Northern State Governors Forum on this matter. But suffice that to say, there is something going on in the cultural and religious angle. But the thing is, in the schools that exist today, you mentioned lack of quality teachers, which is very important. And I've always said we shouldn't spend more time on numbers, that is quantity, rather than the quality of what we are getting. In many schools in the north that I know, you get 200 pupils in one class, where there is no way a teacher can adequately, however good the teacher is, can adequately handle that. So a lot of problems exist, infrastructural, and as much as also the teacher end. What happened in Kaduna was a very courageous action by the governor in addressing a very serious matter. Yes, we understand since the advent of democracy in this country, people have been employed to be teachers. Anybody who is in the political office thinks that the best he can do for his political followers is to employ them as primary school teachers, whether they are employed or not. And that is what Malan Nasir Rufai tried to correct, even though, of course, in politics, you don't deny, they say you don't deny people their source of livelihood. In one family in Zaria I had, there are 7 teachers who were sacked, and all the family is now poor, so he has taken them from the middle class now to the lower class. All that criticism is there, but the approach is excellent, that there has to be some correction. And the social issues aside, that people are now into poverty, 21,000 of them, is another matter altogether. But if you have classes of 200 students, 100 students, where the recommended teacher-pupil ratio should be 1 to 40 maximum, and you have 200, now, of course, however good the teacher is, that situation is not going to change. And therefore, I think it is a problem, especially we in northern Nigeria, which we understand. For instance, if we say all Almajiri school children should be integrated into the formal primary and junior primary education. First and foremost, the Quranic schools are not formal schools. They are not like constructed schools. Most of them are in the foyer of the house of somebody, or in a small room, and 200 of them are there. So pushing them, if we say, okay, we take them to formal primary schools or formal junior secondary schools, that will make the classes now to be not 200 again, maybe 300 and 400. So it is a very structural situation we have on our hands. We don't talk of numbers only out of school. We also talk of the quality of what is happening. We also talk of expanding the base. And there are billions, as I said earlier, with UBEC, and I would like Agar to say that if he has a statistic today, which states, we have to name them and shame them, which states are not collecting their money from UBEC to build more classes, to employ more teachers, to train more teachers. They are there. We should have also the NTI, which is the National Teachers Institute, which looks at the quality of teachers in in primary and junior secondary schools. We should also look at all the indices that these statistics have brought about. And this is going to increase. And this second chance education is very important, which has been done by UBEC. I saw one. It was done by the Mobilization for Development, a DFID program in Jigawa. I visited one I saw in Miga local government, which was done by the local education authority and the M4D, DFID. They assisted the girl child who is hawking. She will come back from hawking and in the afternoon go to a second chance education school. I think this, because most of our schools in the north are free in the afternoon. We see no reason why a school should be free even in the night. The building is there and the facilities are there. And so how many streams can we have in a school? We can have a morning stream, an afternoon stream, an evening stream, a night stream. We give light to those schools. And we can push back all these out-of-school children back into school. But one thing I think everybody should note, we are handling the Almajiri issue and all other issues in Nigeria with the proverbial kids' gloves. There are laws in this country, and laws are made to be obeyed and to be strictly enforced. If government is afraid of enforcing laws, the law says every child must be in school at least 9 years. If he's not in a functional school, he must be made to be in school. That law must be enforced. And because people are afraid that in 1991 there was a policy in Kano State which says all children, including Almajiris, should be in school, etc., etc. One governor, I remember, was saying that maybe they will seek the curse of God on him, and so he will not implement that. This is the kind of mentality you have with our politicians. It doesn't make any sense for you as a political leader to be afraid of enforcing laws which you know and the society knows are good for your people. So the government should enforce the law. While we do the mobilization, people will never just correctly accept change. Change is brought on people. It has to be shown that all this example in the villages, everybody knows you cannot be a councillor, you cannot be a chairman of local government, you cannot be a commissioner. Every villager knows you have to go through Western education schools. We know that, they know that, and they are convinced, but they are not enlightened enough. They are not. They are too poor, they think, to be able to sponsor their children to schools. Laws must be enforced while we do the mobilization. Education is a right for the child, and the child must go to school. And so the parent who does not allow or send their children to school must be punished by government. No second thing about it. I'm a northerner, I'm a far northerner, I am a Muslim. I know Islam says you must seek education, and the first verse, the first word in the Quran is Iqra, read. How can you read if you are not educated? Islam is about reading, it's about education, it's about knowledge. And you allow people, just because they are there and they refuse to change, and then you allow them, you continue telling them what to do. No, you force them to do the right thing, whatever the consequences. And that is the political price we have to pay.
Dr. Bala Muhammad, I want to thank you very much for your worthy contribution. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, and we've been looking at the challenge of out-of-school children and solutions to it. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with our discussion.
Hold it! Me! I don't come out my hand from oil bunkering.
General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn serve? I don't understand though.
Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants said, you know who? Me! I don't do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
General, don't move!
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Registration
Registration is now open for state and sports clubs to participate with free accommodation and feeding for athletes and officials on the basis of first come, first served at the first National Grassroots Sports Festival, Sports for All, to discover sport talent, develop future world champions, and rejuvenate sports in Nigeria. Date 19 to 29th of April 2018. Venue National Stadium Abuja, packages A and B. This is an opportunity for state governors to mobilize supporters and fans for their state through broadcast sponsorship and for companies to promote their brand. For broadcast sponsorship, contact Angelo Peter I. Elosia, Chairman and Chief Coordinator, or Nick Onyisi. Organizers, Grassroots International Sports Academy and LOP Worldwide Television. Endorsed by the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. Broadcast partner, NTA, the largest television network in Africa.
All right, you're welcome back, and we're still looking at the phenomenon of out-of-school children in Nigeria. We've had our guest here in the studio speaking extensively to the issue. But before we continue, we have another guest who's joined us. But just before I introduce him, let's take the tweets that we have coming from our viewers. We're receiving your comments, and it's coming via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. The very first tweet is from Dilly Jackson Solomon. He said, ironically, despite massive global gains in access to education, recent learning assessment revealed that many children around the world are leaving school unequipped, even with foundational literacy and numerical skills, let alone higher order 21st century skills. This is alarming.
Steve Bond 007 tweets, poverty mixed with ignorance is responsible. The National Orientation Agency can also do more public enlightenment.
And Derek Jackson Solomon tweets again. He says our educational curriculum needs to be changed and restructured, especially as regards early childhood education. We also need to structure the curriculum to be able to adequately train the early childhood teachers, while government at all levels has to do more and be involved in the project.
And Clifford Agugozi tweets, why do we have out-of-school children? Majorly total absence or poor planning at all levels of society and all tiers of government. We must accept the brazen truth. Both out-of-school and in-school children are challenged. The difference is in degrees.
And Victor Moswamo tweets, says some of the causes for high out-of-school children include poverty, the economy, cultural, religious beliefs, and lately insecurity in the Northeast. In addition to school feeding program, government at all levels should implement policies to encourage higher school enrollment.
Mutana Farouk tweets, good morning to Nigerians. There could be various factors responsible for that, though one of the major factors is the wrong mindset of the pessimists about unemployment, about schools. Many people are discouraged to go to school because of the level of unemployment.
All right, and Jelly Jackson Solomon Twitter says our educational system needs overhauling and introduction of pragmatic learning. That's teaching approaches like it was done in Finland, US, Australia, Canada, Germany, Norway, and etc. Let's forget this paper certification. Let's make our education interesting.
Clifford Agugozi again tweets, corruption is another critical factor. Most resources meant for children in schools are diverted for personal use by administrators and sometimes brazenly sold in the open places. Where are the mosquito nets that project partners supply?
All right, those are the tweets that we have right now. Remember, you can continue to be a part of this conversation if you tweet at us at our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. We're now being joined by a public commentator. He is Jai Gaskia. Jai Gaskia, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigeria.
You've been listening to all of our guests, and you've heard the figures. You've been listening to the challenges that they've been speaking to. First of all, let's get your thoughts on the out-of-school children.
I think that the first thing to do is to agree with all of the things that have been said, in terms of all of those factors. But I think that the most significant of the factors really is leadership, is failure of leadership. And when I say leadership, I don't just mean political leadership. I don't just mean being in government. I mean the elite leadership. And this is why I agree with Dr. Bala that it's an elite conspiracy to keep people out of school. We talk about cultural barriers, but the children of the elite are going to school. It's the same culture. It's the same part of the country. The children of the elite are going to school. It is the children of the rural poor that are not going to school. And then we say it's cultural barrier. That's not cultural barrier. That's elite barrier. That's the elite making sure that some people are not going to school. And I will give you an example because earlier on you actually mentioned community initiatives to get people educated in the past. In the First Republic and in the Second Republic, political parties took leadership in terms of what the developmental objectives were. And so political parties and their members were driving it. So it became elite. So when a political party, for example, says free education, education is my objective, or housing is my objective, it was driven by that party, driven by everybody. In the same note, in the First Republic, people were going to school. Education was compulsory in the First Republic. So why? What happened over the past few decades? Now, and one of the things again that is also missing is also when you say it's not just education that needs to be overhauled, it's actually governance in general that needs to be overhauled. In the First Republic and second, and still up to the Second Republic, when communities still had a sense, a very strong sense of self-governance, and their institutions were still functioning, they could do these things that they are talking about. But right now, communities are not governed. They are ungoverned spaces now. And so therefore, everything in the community is seen as something that is brought, including the schools, is seen as something that is brought from outside to the community. And therefore, it's not community owned, and therefore community does not see an interest, in doing that. And we need to also go back to reforming that in terms of devolving powers to the communities, formal governance powers to communities, so that communities can actually take charge of their own immediate needs, which include education in terms of their children.
Let's look at the Child Rights Act that says that every parent must send their children to school. Where are we having the challenge of enforcing this?
Again, it's just what I've said. It's elite conspiracy. And Dr. Bala mentioned it earlier. I mean, there are laws. The laws have been made. Okay, we enact the Child Rights Act, and then some people come up with the idea that it's a federal legislation. So states need to domesticate it. They need to do their own child rights acts and the rest of that. But according to our constitution, that is unconstitutional. According to our constitution, once a federal law has been validly made by a National Assembly that has representatives from the states, it becomes binding on the country. So it's a federal law. So it's about enforcing it. How do you enforce? How do you ensure that this is enforced? And that's and that's why I also mentioned failure of leadership. Because if the elite was actually coming out and talking to the community and showing that education actually really does have a value for everybody, people are going to follow. After all, people follow them to do other things. Why wouldn't they follow them also to educate their children if the elite was actually committed, to having that done? So I mean, how can you have followership and people who more or less nearly worship you, and yet your children are in school, their children are not in school, and you say it's a cultural barrier? It's simply because you're actually not telling them, the right things, and you are not, moving them in the right direction. So laws should be enforced, and it's not just the Child Rights Act. I'm of the school of thought. Chapter 2 of our Constitution is very clear. Now, what the Child Rights Act did was simply to give an enabling act to make sure that Chapter 2, the provision on education, can then be, implemented. But Chapter 2 is very clear about the responsibility of government. in terms of many of these things that needs to be done. And every section in Chapter 2, all the 12 sections of Chapter 2 from Section 13 to Section 24 is very clear. It begins with the phrase, the state or the government shall do this. The state or the government shall do this. Shall is not a conditional verb. Shall is an obligatory verb. It means it must do it. If the intention of the writers of the Constitution was that it was going to be conditional, it will say the state may do this. But it says the state shall do this. So again, we have to go back to a situation where, and this is where citizens themselves need to take responsibility for this, because we need to attach a political cost to some of these issues so that political leaders can take responsibility. And you know that if this does not happen, that there is a political cost that is attached to it.
Mr. Jai Gaske, I want to thank you very much for your contribution. Let's move quickly to Mr. Bello Kagara. We're talking about the issue of responsibility, collective participation in this process. Now, let's look at government responsibility. Do we have a challenge with funding at this time?
Well, yes, you see, we cannot really appreciate what the government is doing to especially basic education until we see the level of commitment or government commitment in that direction. At the level of funding, most of you here and the entire some part of the world, the Nigerian society know that the federal government has allocated 2% of its consolidated revenue for funding basic education. This year alone, the Commission receives or is going to receive 109 billion in support of basic education. And then what we do there in UBEC is that we have a sharing formula to address the issues from various angles. 50% of that money, that 2%, is allocated straight to state on equality basis to run priority education programs. So you find that in addition to what the states have in their coffers, from UBEC alone, they receive 54 billion. This year, they're going to receive 54 billion to support basic education delivery.
And how frequent is the disbursement process?
It's constant, it's quarterly.
But there's a challenge. We are aware that a lot of states are not coming for that money because they are not also contributing their counterpart funding.
Yeah, that's
and as a result, some of this money you're talking about are just lying there in UBEC without states coming to collect them. I'm almost, I'm almost forced to say, who are these states? What states are not coming for their money, and why are they not coming for it?
Yeah, you see, ironically, states that are not accessing the UBEC funds are states that are adjudged to be financially buoyant. Okay. Because most of them are from the southeast and the south-south. And the states that are economically backward, the northern states, are those in the forefront in accessing the UBEC fund. Okay. So that is where the issue of commitment and leadership, prioritization of education among the leaders, comes to play. And then with regard to sanction UBE as an institution in our law, we are not really mandated to sanction any state because we cannot really take any punitive measure except the regular fiduciary process, accountability issues, to ensure that whichever state accesses money, that money is, utilized judiciously. Okay. That means we follow on financial monitoring, we go on to conduct project monitoring to ensure that the funds received from UBEC are being used judiciously. But as to give punitive measure to the states, we don't do that. Except that any state, we said that any state that doesn't judicially utilize the money will not access future allocations.
Mr. Terry Daniel, let's come back to you now. From our discussions and analysis so far, and from your wealth of knowledge and your work in Nigeria so far, would you say we have a challenge with funding of basic education in Nigeria?
I think under the 2018 budget, the federal budget, there has been an increase. I think it's now 7% of the national budget is designated for education. And that includes, as I think Bello mentioned, is the portion for UBET. But I still think there's the ways, the government can go farther in terms of meeting international obligations. We're looking at, it should be around 24% of budget should be allocated to education. Nigeria has a challenge of the federal and state system, and looking at what's happening in terms of state funding. There's only one state that I think I know of, I can be corrected, is Sokoto, where they've actually budgeted 24% for education. Because I think, as the guest mentioned, political will, not simply talking about it, but putting action behind the words and commitments, and in committing the funds to address the issue. So I think there's a lot more that they could do in the future in terms of allocating funds to meet international levels set out by UNESCO.
Well, there was just a recent report, just recently by UNICEF also too, that there's this challenge of children going to school and not learning. You have kids now, they are in school, you keep them in school, but they're not comprehending or they're not learning. What factors could be responsible for that?
I think that's well addressed by the gentleman from Kaduna talking about some of the challenges. There are issues in terms of teachers' ability. And I think a lot of agencies like UNICEF are working with SUBEB at the state level and looking at increasing the capacity of teachers. And not just doing the same thing, same over. We're looking at innovative interventions around early grade reading. Something teachers don't learn is how to teach reading. And addressing these issues. And I mean, in agencies like UNICEF, we partner with the state or federal government in terms of demonstrating something that could work, and then build capacity at the state and national level. Hopefully, through the evaluation for the cash transfer, for example, they can take on. You mentioned, I think earlier, with pre-primary education, early childhood. Right now, and the alignment between pre-service training and curriculum, which is a challenge in Nigeria. And there's a process going on now where changing the curriculum, making it, I hate to use the word more modern, looking at original methodology in terms of learning based on play, innovative practices. So what teachers learn in pre-service or in teachers training colleges is aligned to the expectations of what they should be teaching in the classroom, and updating what they should be teaching in terms of what are the knowledge, skills, behaviors that children at a young age should be learning. Because we know in Nigeria, we talk about out of school, the issue is really getting children in from the beginning. That's the biggest hurdle. Once we get children into the system, they tend to stay. We have other countries, you talk about dropout. That's probably less, I mean, that happens, but that's not the big challenge. It's really getting children in at the right age. If you talk about pre-primary or ECD, 3 to 5, and then primary at 6. That's very critical. And I think coming back to the gentleman talking about, this community ownership of schools, engagement is very critical. That they're invested in participating in what happens in the school, knowing what's happening. Do they know what's being taught in the school and how it's being taught? And that engagement. And that element, I think, as mentioned before, accountability. So parents are coming and saying, okay, what's happening? What are you teaching? And just because maybe a parent doesn't read and write so well, should not inhibit them to ask questions. So if a child comes home, it's not a question whether the parent can read or not. It's asking the child, what did you learn today? Tell me what you learned. Show me. So and in fact, the parents learning from the child, but it's the parents demonstrating interest, and the parents also knowing that the child is benefiting from what's happening in the classroom.
Now, in all of this, is there some form of collaboration between UNICEF and stakeholders in Nigeria?
Stakeholders meaning?
Stakeholders in the education sector to ensure that we get it right.
Well, I think there's a lot happening. I think we're working with our partners is the federal government of Nigeria, being a UN agency. We're very close with UBAC, but also at the state level. If I go back to the example of the enrollment drive framework, that was developed at the community level, responding to a community need that there's a disconnect between school and community. So working with the school-based management committees, which is a formal structure, and having them go out and linking that with community. And that framework was developed at the community level, went up to the state level, states adopted it, we supported it, states funded it, and then became a national framework. And that's really the government learning from grassroots or stakeholders, be it communities, civil society. But I think there needs to be more discussion. There is learning. I mentioned earlier with early grade reading programs. UNICEF supporting in partnership with SUBEB. USAID is supporting as well. Because we know that in the first 3 years of primary school, it's a foundation. If you get it right then, that's the basis of all future knowledge. Not the knowledge itself, but the skills. Ask questions, participate, collaborate, dialogue, discussion, interactive. So there is progress being made. But the challenge is really how to bring that together and maybe looking at a more systematic change. And that's happening with the pre-primary now. And I think it needs to happen maybe in the primary moving forward.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Terry Donyan. Now let's go to our Kaduna Network Center where we have Dr. Bala Mohammed. Dr. Bala Mohammed, very briefly, I'd like you to also speak to the issue that's on, and that's the issue of funding, for education, especially at the primary level.
Thank you very much once again. I think the easiest money to steal by politicians is number one, pension money, because most of the rightful owners are old and they are weak. The second easiest money to steal is primary and basic education money, and that is where all politicians give contracts, and that is where the chairman of the local government, the state governor, and everybody has something to do. I once suggested, for instance, why don't we build concrete cement benches in schools and tables so that nobody will have any complaint of broken chairs and children sitting on the floor. And somebody looked at me and said, you don't know politics. It is because you're an academician in the ivory tower. Those furniture are the best source of contract for politicians. And so they will always buy them, break them, the children will break them, and then tomorrow another contract will be given. So let us say here, UNICEF suggests 25 to 26% of education budget, of all budget to go to education. That is not too much, a quarter of our money to education. Health is important, roads are important, but none of them are as important as education. And no education is as important as basic education. Civil society, and Jaye, my good friend, is a very, very veritable leader of the civil society. We must do more than we are doing now to have a look at the budget of state governments, the budgets of local governments, and the budget of the federal government. It must we agreed with all, we signed these agreements. When you sign an agreement, it is binding. We signed on MDGs, we never delivered. We signed now on SDGs, and it seems we are not going to deliver. You just, earlier this morning, you were discussing about the African free trade thing, which we nearly signed. If you sign something, you are bound by it. So therefore, we signed SDGs and MDGs, and we know that this recommendation of 25% out of every budget for education is not the optimum. It should be 50% to education. Suffice it to say, civil society and teachers and academicians and parents and communities should ask governments for 25% at least of every budget in every state and every local government should go to education. And then we should all sit down and look how that money is disbursed. And that is, as I said, the easiest place to give contract. And therefore, you give contract for useless books to politicians, you give contract to useless furniture where you can build concrete furniture. And a primary school can have 8 blocks of classes and 4 of them have no roofs. The contractor who did them, when you visit his house, the roof on his house is still intact. The roof on the primary school is not intact. The society and the community and civil society must ensure that that contractor's roof should also be removed. If you build a primary school and the roof goes off, your own house should lose its roof so that you can enjoy or suffer the collateral damage of what you did in primary schools. We should all, as civil society, as a community, as a nation, we should look at basic education. If we don't get it right, that's what we are suffering now in the university. We are saying standard of education has fallen. We give students, I teach, for instance, media English, we teach public speaking, and we find our students are very, very backward in so many things. They can't write good essays, they can't speak very well. It is because they didn't get it right in basic education. If you get it right in basic education, you will get it right in middle education, that is in secondary school, and when you come to university, we'll be very happy about you. But the way things are, we know some of them who come with 9 credits and 250 in JAM, they actually sit for it. So
all right, Dr. Bala Mohammed, that's the much we can take from you from our Kaduna Network Center. Lots and lots of very, very important issues and thoughts for us this morning that you have raised on the program. Thank you so much for your contributions from our Kaduna Network Center. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Jai Gaskia, let's get your final thoughts very, very briefly. How can we surmount some of these challenges? What do you think we need to do?
Again, I think it's about being very creative about how we approach our issues. So funding for education, for example, and education is a basic thing for everything. So, but there are agric schools. There is education in agriculture, there is education in transport, there is education in science and technology and the rest of that. So, I mean, the 24% may not be the education budget, but are we ensuring that education as a foundation for all the other sectors of the economy are also being taken care of in their ministries and in their line ministries? And you can't ensure that if you are not planning, if you don't have an integrated and holistic plan. You can't see how teachers' education connects with the education of nurses, connects with the education of agriculturists and the rest of that. And that's what we need to do in order to be able to get this right. Again, it means that we have to reform the way governance is undertaken in the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jai Gaskia, for your contributions this morning. Moving on now, Mr. Terry Jr., let's have your last thought on this issue.
I think in terms of the big issue of out-of-school children, I think the big critical step was when, I think 2016, when the government admitted there was 10 million plus. I would say 10 minutes plus because, and I think that was a very critical point because you need to have the information, the data. And I think linking to gentleman who spoke before, and it's then we know the issue, okay, and then it's having the funds to address it, and then credible planning based on evidence to address the issue. And I agree, look at creativity. It's not trying to do one thing, but it's looking at multiple things based on the context and the importance of engaging with communities and linking communities and government.
I want to thank you very much, Mr. Terry Doniam of UNICEF. Let's move over to Mr. Bello Kagara of UBEC now. Let's have your final thoughts on our discussions this morning.
Well, anyway, my final thought with regard to education delivery in the country, and especially out-of-school children, is that it needs collective collaboration and collective action. It's not a one-off and one-directional issue that you say government can do it alone, or the community can do it alone, or maybe say, at the level of the first point of takeoff is adequate sensitization and social orientation of the Nigerian society with regard to value for education. The media should play its own role, NGOs should play their own role, the government play its own role, and then all segments of society come together to say that we are putting priority on education and we have to take collective action towards it.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bello Kagara, Director of Social Mobilization of the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC. Thank you for coming on the program. Also, a very big thank you to Terry Doniam, UNICEF Chief of Education Officer in Abuja. Thank you for coming on the program. And finally, a very big thank you to Jaye Gaskia for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll now go to our complimentary segments where our first complimentary segment is sports. Let's get an update in the world of sports.